you ever felt like reading in your target language is near impossible and you're just struggling to understand things and the comprehension is just so low and it's all overwhelming? I've definitely been in that position myself, and today I wanted to teach you a little system that helps me finish my books weekly. Now, my Korean learning journey started in 2020 during COVID, and that was in the summer holidays. And I remember just laying down on a nice bed and reading through webtoons on my tablet, and this is how I started to fully immerse myself in the reading realm of Korean literature, right? Now, webtoons are a great way for any of you beginner learners to join in and start improving your comprehension slowly and surely, because the benefit of webtoons is, one, they're easy to comprehend. There's a lot of visuals. Language learning is all eyes and ears, guys, so you want to be focused on that. You don't want to be focused on output in the beginning. I've talked about immersion in my other videos, so I'm sure you're probably well aware. Now, the benefit of webtoons is, one, bunch of free content, great. If you use Naval Webtoon, that's one I'd recommend, or you can use Kakao Webtoon. There's a bunch of them, guys, and you capture the unknown words and unknown sentences, and you can use it with tools like Anki and other things to supplement your learning through flashcards. Now, this is really great because, like I've got next to me, a physical book here is, practically speaking, not as efficient when you're first learning a language, especially when you're in the beginner stages, because you're trying to look up as many words as possible, and to look up from a physical book and then type up, it takes away from your immersion, from the sense of your flow state, your focus, right? So that's one little point of insight that you guys can take from that. But another one, perhaps if you're more of an advanced learner, so after I sort of progressed through the webtoons and my understanding was building up, I think it was about a year into my learning journey, maybe a year and a half, I would transition to novels, right? And the point here was that I picked a certain domain. So for any of you more advanced guys out there, you want to pick a domain, right, and focus on mastering the vocabulary within that field. So for example, maybe it's novels, maybe it's science, maybe it's, I don't know, whatever area you're passionate about. But the good thing to do is pick an area which you're already familiar with. So my area that I would probably be most familiar with nowadays maybe is computer science, perhaps, or I don't know, literature, something like that. So I would pick that as an area to focus on for my Korean. I didn't do this when I first started Korean. I actually chose novels, like I said earlier, but I was really unfamiliar with novels and my comprehension was really low. It was probably about 50-60%. So when I was reading through the books, I would literally I remember I bought 3 novels. I bought Kumbaekwajeom Almond, and there's one called like 10cm Diving or something like that. I don't think it's that popular anymore. But anyway, I was going through, highlighting each word, right? Then I'd finish the chapter, look up the words, add them to the Anki, and it was just a whole process. So I, screwed up because I was doing it on physical books, which is not ideal when you're first learning because you want to look things up quickly. 2, I picked a domain which is really hard. Novels are probably the hardest domain to tackle. So you want to make sure it's a domain that is a little bit more comfortable. But if you're like me and you're up to the challenge, go ahead, do novels. But yeah, I would probably steer further away from that. Now, that's just a beginner not beginner tip, a tip for general comprehension and making gains faster than if you were to use physical books right now. But then throughout my journey, I then around 2022 entered a Korean university. So I actually came to Korea and with the purpose of learning and being fully immersed. Now, during this time, I did something which is very important, was I made the monolingual transition. You might have heard of this. It's when you switch from Korean to English dictionary to a Korean dictionary, or whatever your target language may be, right? And that makes a huge difference when you're trying to understand the language, because now you're no longer relying on translations, you're relying on the language itself, right? You're learning within the language, and that is huge for linguistic gains. Not as ideal for knowledge gains, guys, I will be honest. When I was in my first year at uni, I was really struggling because I was going through all these slides and I had no idea what was going on. And actually I didn't supplement my learning with reading, which is another bonus point. But yeah, if you're really passionate about learning something, then you probably want to stick to your native language until you're really advanced, or at least just choose your books wisely, guys. So for example, for me with this book I keep showing to the camera, this is one that I'm reading for knowledge, but what I will do is I'll read a chapter, go back, look it up in English to fill the gaps in my knowledge, and then carry on reading with my Korean. So this is not only for linguistic gain, but for knowledge gain. So if that is the case for you, I'd recommend you do the same. If you're only caring about linguistic gain, then you can read in your target language and just go straight through with that. That's brilliant. If you're only caring about just knowledge, you don't care about improving your target language at all, then read in your native language. Duh, right? So that's the way I go about things as a student here in Korea. And there's another, I suppose I can add some more tips to that actually for you guys, because what I would do, right, I won't just read it, start to finish, just willy-nilly. I would highlight things. So for example, if there's a sentence I want to add or like want to come back to, refer to, I would like draw a little circle around it, and then I'll also put keywords on the side that summarize the paragraph. That's kind of more specific just to general study. What is more specific to language learning is, if I can find a good one, right, yeah. Here we go. So on this page here, first chapter, I don't know if you guys can see this, I've put dots under the words that I don't know. And there's usually 1 to 2, maybe 3 per page, right? And what I would do, I'll look up the words, but I'll look up 1 to 2 words per page, but I will only look up the ones that are actually important to my understanding. And this is kind of crucial, because a lot of you guys might be there struggling and want to look up every word, but your comprehension is so low, there's so many words to look up, right? So what you want to do is try and focus on the words where it really hinders your understanding, not these adjectives where it's like, oh, I kind of might get what that means. Don't look up those to start off with, at least. Then you want to focus on the words that give you the most bang for your buck. Now, how can you know this? You should be able to figure this out intuitively when you're reading. So for example, in this chapter I just showed you here, the word that I didn't know was 개화기, right? And it's like something 개화기, something like that. And I was like, oh, that's really crucial, it's a noun. So I looked that up, bam, looked it up for that page. I might do a second word if I'm feeling like it, and then I'll move on to the next page, bam, taking notes, going through it. Now, that is really, really effective compared to looking up everything and just going crazy with it, or not looking anything up at all, because then you're not actually referring to the dictionary and getting the knowledge consolidated in your brain. Does that make sense to you guys? Hopefully that, rings a bit of a bell. Now since then, right, so I joined university in first year, I am now coming up to my third year, I've really, really improved my general sort of knowledge acquisition, right? Because we're talking about reading books here, guys, and I'm not just talking about linguistic gains, but I also want to talk about attaining knowledge in your target language via, reading, and preferably, what do you call that? Self-inflicted reading. That's probably a different definition. Self-selected reading, right? You want to be choosing books that supplement your learning, but are not necessarily forced upon you, right? You don't want to just read the slides. You want to read books that are helpful, right? So, just as a quick tip for general knowledge and how I like to study, I like to do something called Q&A notes. So I've got some here next to me. Q&A notes are basically you ask a question about the content that you've just read. So you'll read a chapter, read a few paragraphs, ask a question, then close the book, write down the answer based on what you think it is, then cross-check with the book and see if you're right. So what I've done here, can I give a good example? So yeah, my question here says 종차는 무엇인가? So 종차 is, the English word for that is genus differentia. I don't know, anyway. I looked up the green definition for that word. I read the paragraph, looked up the definition, and then I sort of wrote down the answer here. And then now I've literally got a question which is asking me about the knowledge in the book, bam, with the answer, bam, which I've cross-checked with the book to make sure it's right, because then I know I'm actually learning the right material. And that is huge, guys. So you want to be doing that if you're trying to retain knowledge, right? That's the next level, because you don't want to be that guy who's just only writing keywords or not doing any note taking at all, because the main purpose of reading books in general, guys, is to obtain the knowledge. Of course, we're learning languages for the linguistic gain, and that's great and brilliant, be as articulate as you want to be, but also knowledge is cool, guys. And while you're learning another language, you also want to be extracting as much knowledge as possible. At least that's my philosophy. So that is how you can go about that. Anything else? There was one other thing I think I wanted to touch upon before we sort of wrap things up here, but attending university in Korea really helped me level up my Korean, because I was just forced to learn in an environment where it's all monolingual and you can't really escape to English to explain things. So, I mean, you probably could actually, because in my universities, the professors do speak fairly decent English, but it's a different environment, guys. When you learn something in your target language as well, you find it hard to explain in your native tongue, because you've just learned, let's say like, from a linguistics point of view, let's say you learn a new concept about psychology. I learned something called the 숙면 효과, which means sleeper effect in English, right? And I learned about this, and I didn't know the English word, but I could kind of translate it because 숙면 means sleep. And I was like, oh, something to do with sleep. Bam, I learned it, right? But then that's one scenario where you can learn something in your foreign language and it kind of roughly translates and you'll be able to explain it. But then I learned something called 정교화 가능성 model, which is a likelihood elaboration model, I believe, or elaboration likelihood model in English. And I didn't know this, right? I didn't know the English term for this. So I was learning this all in Korean, which is fine. But then I was stuck, right? And what you guys really want to do if you're trying to consolidate your knowledge from your reading is when you get stuck in your target language, when you don't know, finish the chapter, finish the paragraph, finish the key core bit of information you're looking for, then refer to your native language. Don't do it the other way around. Don't get a little bit stuck and then refer to English, which is a lot of mistake. It's a common mistake that I see people do. It's like they just kind of rely on English too much. There's nothing wrong with consolidating with your English, the English resource to, learn stuff, but you don't want to rely on it as a crutch. So the way I'd go about it, is read first, then consolidate to English if you're really, really stuck. But most of the time, guys, you'll actually be surprised of how much you can learn in a foreign language. And I think with some of the tips that I gave you earlier, like reading, using monolingual dictionaries, also using ebooks, picking specific domains, picking stuff that is within your comprehension level, you'll actually be surprised by how much progress you make. If you've never read a book in your target language before, I'd highly recommend you, after watching this video, actually go and try and do so. Maybe even it's just like a webtoon or a small paragraph or something like that. Just get that sense of winning, feel the win is what I like to offer to you guys. Now, if you guys really want some personal advice, you can always DM me over at my Instagram page. I just recently started this as a social experiment, and from there I'm also uploading what I'm reading, like books like this, and you guys can hopefully apply like the insights that I learn to your own language learning journey, and hopefully it'll be great and a win-win, right? So yeah, if you do want some personal advice, go ahead and send me a DM on there. Yeah, so the only other time that I would use English would be to refer to information that I need quickly, but for the most time, balancing linguistic knowledge and knowledge through reading books in your target language is really the way to go. So hopefully you are now a little bit more sure on the practices of what you need to do to obtain the knowledge via reading your target language through this video. So just to summarize, guys, we went through at the beginning stage of your journey, you want to start off with easy to comprehend materials, so things like webtoons. You want to stick to ebooks, digital resources, rather than physical books, because it's a lot easier to look things up. If you pull out a physical book like this and you're looking things up every 5 seconds, it really gets clunky. You don't really need to do this unless you're more focused on knowledge, because knowledge, usually you remember things better when you read from physical books. So that's the first tip. Then also we talked about how looking up things on the page, right? You don't want to look up every single word. You want to look up the word that is key to the understanding. So as you go through the page, you want to maybe highlight 1 to 2 words, then have a look, reassess and go, oh, that's a noun, that looks quite important. Oh, that's an adjective, probably less important. I could probably figure that out via context, right? So you want to focus on the ones that give you the most bang for your buck. So yeah, go for that page by page. And then if you're still struggling to understand at the end of the chapter, then you can find the English resource or maybe ask AI to help you out with your understanding. So that's how you go about that. Then for general comprehension and knowledge of books in general, this is related to your native tongue and target language, you would probably benefit, I recommend you use Q&A notes. So like I've written down here, Q&A notes, you ask a question, write down the answer, check with a book to see if your answer is correct, and then when you want to review, you can literally just go, oh, question, oh, answer, and then you cover the answer, right? Ask the question, think about it, oh, is that the right answer? Yes, it is, check it, bam, no, it's not, I need to go and review and just keep going through. This is a really good way for just studying for exams and for university students in general. So hopefully, guys, with those tips, you are now able to read a little bit easier in your target language. Again, if there's something I didn't cover or things that you were a little bit unsure about, you can always ask for personal advice on my Instagram on screen. Thank you very much, guys. I wish you all the best in your language learning journey, and I will see you guys in another video next week. Thank you very much.